not on. Joe, can we get a mic on?
Thank you. Hi. Everybody's leaving. Come back. We're talking about regulation. Come on. My name is PERIANNE. I think probably most of you have had the opportunity to meet. If I haven't, please stop by and say hi to me at some point. I'm the president and the founder of the Chamber of Digital Commerce. It's a trade association in D.C. We represent the digital asset, digital currency, Bitcoin industries, and communities to government. And I have a very important guest and friend with me today. His name's Jim Newsome, or officially Dr. James Newsome. He's much more distinguished than he would tell you, so I'm going to brag on him. I'll give you a little bit of background about Jim. He is the founding partner of Delta Strategy Group, which is a government affairs firm in D.C. Before that, he was the chairman of the CFTC. That's the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. It's a federal agency that oversees the derivatives market. So in the year 2000, he was nominated by President Bush, confirmed by the Senate to serve in this capacity. He was probably the most powerful person in the derivatives industry until 2004. After that, his career continued. He went to become the president and the CEO of the New York Mercantile Exchange, or NYMEX. It was the largest physical derivatives exchange in the world at the time. He took that company public, went through their IPO. He merged it with the CME Group, and they made it the world's largest futures marketplace. He then retired. Today, he has now started his own firm in D.C., and he's the chairman of LedgerX, and he also serves on our advisory board of the chamber. So, Jim, you're probably one of the most distinguished people that's entered the Bitcoin space. Tell us a little bit about your previous role at the CFTC and NYMEX.
Well, first of all, you're way too kind, PERIANNE, but thank you. My tenure at the CFTC was a very busy tenure in terms of chairmanships. We had lots of activities that we dealt with during my tenure, including the collapse of Enron and the collapse then of the natural gas market that we dealt with as a regulator. And then the September 11 crisis. Our New York office was in the Second World Trade Tower, and so not only working to get the markets back up as quickly as possible, but working with all the personnel issues that came with the towers coming down. The good news is we didn't lose anyone, but it took us about 3 days to determine that. So my experience at the CFTC was a good one. The CFTC has traditionally been known as one of the more business-friendly regulatory agencies. That has changed a bit with the implementation of Dodd-Frank over the last couple or 3 years. But the CFTC really focuses on markets, making sure that markets operate in an open manner, that they're transparent, they're fair. They do a good job of discovering true prices. And as an economist, my focus has always been a very market-driven focus. So the tenure at the CFTC was a positive one for me.
And you're very experienced in financial technology and regulation. How does regulation shape and play into financial innovation?
Well, I think sensible regulation is a positive for markets, is a positive for technology. Unfortunately, you don't always end up with sensible regulation out of Washington, D.C. And the majority of the time is because of a lack of education of what the government or a regulatory agency is attempting to regulate. But I think in most cases where you have sensible regulatory environment over a market, it adds transparency, it adds credibility to the market and the technology, and I think those are both big pluses.
Now, Arthur Levitt, he was the longest-serving chairman at the SEC, and he has now joined the board of 2 companies in this space, Mir, who's in Palo Alto, and BitPay, who's also one of the sponsors here at this conference. How did you develop your relationship with LedgerX? And for people like yourself and Arthur, what do you bring to the industry in serving in these capacities?
Well, I think, Chairman Levitt not only was the longest tenured serving chairman of the SEC, he was also a very aggressive chairman, particularly as it related to customer protection. So he has this long history of both rules and enforcement actions protecting the general customer base. I think particularly him brings a lot of credibility. it brings a knowledge base of how to navigate through the regulatory agencies, which a lot of people, I think, take for granted or certainly misunderstand. Having someone like Chairman Lovett who knows who to talk to, who knows how things move through the SEC is a huge plus. With regard to my relationship with LedgerX, it started in a very typical manner for a firm like mine. They had gone to a law firm in New York to help them with their CFTC application. The law firm said, you're going to need assistance in taking this application through the CFTC, knowing the right people to meet with. So Paul and Juthica called us at Delta. And as we listened to what they were doing and their business model and their plan, we decided that we were going to take a different approach. And instead of asking for a normal monthly fee, which firms like ours would do, we said we would like equity in the company. And so we traded out our services for equity in LedgerX. That led to them asking me if I would be interested in serving on the board, which led to them asking me to chair the board. So, kind of a strange way to get into that position, but it's worked out well. The application is at the CFTC now. No major obstacles have been identified. It's just crossing the T's and dotting the I's at this point.
Well, the CFTC is just one agency in Washington that's looking at this industry, and in our work, we're engaging with about at least 8, 9, maybe even 10 others. And we definitely see the regulatory environment as quite complicated and a huge risk and a major friction point to the industry. But it sounds like you're pretty long and bullish on Bitcoin. What do you see as the future for the industry, and what's the most important thing to you for the growth of the industry?
Well, I think there are a lot of things, and you're correct. There are a lot of agencies that at least want to peek under the hood at Bitcoin or other digital currencies. But it's primarily because of lack of understanding. And the education component in D.C. Cannot be overstated. But I think, you look at what some of the agencies have done. Treasury has already said, well, it's not a currency. The SEC has said it's not a security. One commissioner at the CFTC, Mark Weegan, said it looks and feels like a commodity to him, and the CFTC defines commodity in a very, very broad sense. So that's logical to me. But with regard to the CFTC, it really doesn't matter how it gets classified, currency, security, commodity, because the CFTC doesn't regulate the underlying cash component. It regulates the derivatives trading of that component. So the CFTC is not concerned of where Bitcoin or other digital currency may end up, if it ends up anywhere, through some kind of cash regulatory structure. It's confident that it has the authority to regulate it as a traded derivative.
So in this work that you're doing, what other types of trading platforms are you currently aware of that we might see come to market soon?
Well, I think certainly there are a lot of spot markets that are already operating as exchanges in the space. I think Terra has self-certified derivatives contracts at the CFTC that are cash-settled contracts. The LedgerX contracts are physically delivered contracts, and I'm not sure that most would understand the difference between the two. In a cash-settled contract, it's a contract that doesn't go to delivery. Whatever the price differential is at the expiration of the contract, there's a payment made from the loser to the winner.
And what percentage normally would actually cash out?
Well, even in the physically delivered contracts, typically someone would trade out of the contract before expiration, and over 99%, even if it's a physically delivered contract, will end up being cash settled. However, because it is a physically delivered contract, at expiration, if the owner wants to take possession of the underlying, say, Bitcoin in this space, you would actually be able to buy and sell Bitcoin by trading the options contracts at LedgerX. And while that is not typically the case, it wouldn't surprise me for that to be the case, that much more would go to delivery under the LedgerX plan. It's kind of like the Dubai Mercantile Exchange, which I helped found about 10 years ago. we were quite surprised when we started operating the exchange, which traded a Middle Eastern sour crude, that over 80% of the contracts went to delivery. It was used as a cash market, and the reason being because it was the most open and transparent and the only regulated sour crude price mechanism in the Middle East. So people had comfort with it, and they used it as a cash contract. I think we could see some of the same with LedgerX because it would be the first, U.S. government regulated, transparent physical delivery contract available, and some people may like the comfort of using the regulated contract to buy and sell.
You think that would affect the price volatility?
I think the transparency and the regulatory component will dampen volatility because it'll be so transparent as to where the market is and how it moves and why it's moving.
We've covered a lot of different topics just in the past couple minutes, and in this Bitcoin, digital currency, digital asset industry, and I keep using these different terms because it's not just Bitcoin as a currency, we're also talking about it as a commodity. You also have the 2.0 applications that don't have much to do with currency, more about alternative applications and alternative uses of the blockchain. Where do you see the future of financial tech? Are we going more towards currency, efficient markets, or are we going more towards something else that we might not even be thinking of at the moment? Where are you seeing the direction go?
Well, it seems to me, and I'm not nearly as knowledgeable about technology and the underlying as most people in this room, but it seems to be I don't think it has to be either or. I think you see it moving in the direction of serving as a currency, even if the Treasury doesn't necessarily deem it as a currency. But I think, you're looking at the maturation of a market. And I think transparency, comfort, hopefully less volatility, all will be part of that maturation.
And can you also, for those who are not exactly familiar with the Washington process and why it's necessary for the industry to be involved with what the Washington, D.C. community, when an issue like Bitcoin, that's extremely a tiny market compared to a lot of the other industries that would come across your desk working at the CFTC, what is the process of somebody coming in and bringing this issue to the commission? How do you even get into the commission? Who's actually looking at it? The different levels of staff.
Well, that's the hard thing for most people to navigate if they haven't been part of that scenario. First of all, I think a mistake that people make when they come to D.C. is that they feel like they've got to develop a relationship with everyone, and that's not the case. Either you do your research or you work with a firm who has a background, and you target individuals, whether it's key members of Congress that are serving on the committees that are important to your issue, and not only those members of Congress, but their staffs as well, because that's who at the end of the day is going to end up doing most of the work. And then at the agencies as well. A lot of people feel like when they first visit the CFTC, they immediately need to or want to have a meeting with the chairman or a meeting with the commissioners. And more often than not, it's more important to meet with the staff.
Right, you don't want to meet with that person quite yet.
Well, it's, it is a bureaucracy. And at the end of the day, the staff are the ones who are going to do the work, who are going to grant the approval, work with you throughout the process. So I think it's important to build a relationship with the staff that you're going to be working with, whether it's as a designated market or whether it's as a clearing organization. Those are the people that you're going to work with day in and day out. Those are the people that are going to raise your questions. And then after you develop that relationship, then I think it's beneficial to meet with the chairman or the commissioner, say, we've been meeting with the staff, we're on a good track, these are the questions that have been raised, this is what we're doing to solve the issues that the staff have raised. And so sometimes if the staff feels like you're going around them, if you come in the building, you don't meet with them and you meet with the chairman or the commissioners. And it's important to develop a working relationship with the staff.
Right, and I felt, a lot of what you're saying, I saw that on Capitol Hill. I worked for a member of the Financial Services Committee, and the amount of issues that come across members of Congress' desks that they have to either sign off on or vote on, or they have to sit in a hearing debating these issues, it's way more than any one person could ever handle, and that's why policymakers, regulators, members have these staff, and they can go through and they can really go through the details. And that's why when I'm talking with our members and our partners, the importance of having a presence in Washington, D.C. And that's important for this industry because many of these startups are located not in D.C. I don't think there's really anybody in D.C. Everyone's either in Silicon Valley, in New York, and there's also a lot of people who are going overseas. But it's important that you have somebody on your behalf on the ground who is constantly building these relationships, going in regularly and updating either the members of Congress or the regulators that you're working with, making sure if a scandal breaks out, a hack or something, you call them, let them know, hey, you might see this in the news, just want to give you the details and the actual facts of what happened. And this isn't something you can do remotely. It's about being a part of the Washington culture, and as much as that might not resonate with some of the early adopters of Bitcoin, as somebody who really does appreciate the technology and who full-time is an advocate for this technology, I can't stress the importance of being a part of that community to make sure your voice is heard at these meetings.
Well, and the message has to be very well delivered. I mean, if you want to see a member of Congress's eyes glaze over, you walk into his office and start talking about derivatives. I mean, they all know it's important, but they don't understand it, and you can lose them very quickly. So typically you have to dumb down the message, and ideally you want to get that message across in about 10 minutes. It's a funny story, and I didn't tell you I was going to say this, so you'll laugh. But as an example, a friend of mine who's a lobbyist in D.C. was contacted by a group of New York bankers who wanted to go in and see a congressman. And the lobbyist said, no, you don't want to see the congressman, you want to see his staff. And the group of bankers said, no, we have to see the congressman. So the lobbyist set up the meeting. He knew the congressman very well. They walked in and sat down and did the introductions, and as soon as they sat down, the congressman turned to the lobbyist. He said, now, Macon, before we get started, I want you to explain the difference between a swap and a derivative. And Macon said, sure, Congressman, we'd be glad to do so. A swap is when two couples go away for the weekend together and ended up changing spouses, and the divorce is the derivative. So, of course, the bankers just went nuts. You sit down, shut up, don't say anything else. But I guess the point was the congressman didn't have any interest in sitting down and talking about this. Macon had tried to direct them to the staff. They didn't listen, and that's what happened.
And it's not that they're not necessarily not interested. It's because maybe they don't serve on a committee that has anything to do with Bitcoin. It's not within their, their committee's jurisdiction. It's not something that has anything to do with their constituency, and therefore it's not on their priority list. But again, that's why we go and create, relationships with these people to force that priority on people.
Yeah. And typically, most members of Congress are half an inch deep and 3 miles wide. And the reason it's important to meet with the staff is because then when you're coming in for the meeting, the member of Congress or a commissioner at the CFTC, whomever it is, would have liked a briefing from the staff on what you're coming in for, what the topic is, so they at least have some understanding before the meeting of why you're there.
Another funny story, I digged up an old video of Congressman Mel Watt. He was nominated to oversee the federal housing, federal housing, oversee all of Fannie and Freddie's, $1 trillion of derivatives. And he was a member who served on the Financial Services Committee, and during a hearing, he said, I don't know anything about derivatives. I've been on this committee for 10 years. I still don't know anything about derivatives. And that was the person that was nominated by the president to oversee $1 trillion derivative portfolio. So again, it's these people still hold powerful positions, and not that everybody is completely ignorant to Bitcoin or ignorant to these issues, but again, it's more about the process and understanding the protocol and understanding how this town works and getting across your message effectively. An example of this is last week. The Treasury held a round table on financial access for MSBs. And another member of our board, her name is Carol Van Cleef. I'm not sure if she's out here, but she was here earlier. She wrote the Treasury on behalf of the Chamber and said, if you're going to have this discussion, you need to make sure that somebody from the Bitcoin industry is there. If there's anybody having trouble with financial access, it's Bitcoin. And we did a survey of a bunch of companies in this space, and over 90% of the people that responded to our survey said they had issues opening a bank account. So we have now, petitioned our way into this roundtable, and we were able to, for the first time, raise this issue with the top banking regulators. So at this point, they are aware that this is an issue. We are prepared to make that deeper dive to really start doing some educational efforts to overcome this issue of financial access for this industry. We have a couple minutes left. We have about maybe 7 minutes left. Would anybody like to ask Jim, or I guess myself, a question about our roles in DC and Bitcoin?
While they're thinking about that, one thing I wanted to add, I was asked a question earlier today by someone at the conference. It said, what's the most important thing that we need to be doing in Washington? And it's really two things. It's education and relationship building, because you want to build those relationships now. I mean, we've had some negative press. That's what most in Washington are familiar with. We've kind of weathered that, and now it's the time to come in and start having meetings with key members and key regulators, building the relationships with them so that the next time we go in to see them, it's not because we have a crisis. We've already been in to meet and talk about what we're doing, how we're doing it, why it's important. Not only to the financial sector, but to our country as a whole. So, and the Chamber, and that's what the Chamber does, and that's critical. So I know there are a lot of companies represented here. If you're not currently working with the Chamber, I encourage you to get in touch with PERIANNE, because what we're doing there is critical.
Thanks, Jim. I see Tone down here, who always has great questions.
The question was, what do I think about not regulating it for as long as possible? And I think that's a very legitimate question, and I think there are pros and cons to both. I think most industry, a lot of industries, and I think about hedge funds, and I think about proprietary trading firms. As far as Washington, D.C., they tried to keep their head in the sand for as long as possible. Keep operating, hopefully making money without any kind of government interference. The problem is when you take that approach, normally when you do run into government interference is because something really negative has happened, and the consequences from Washington are normally not very good.
Like online gambling.
Right. The tide can turn very quickly in D.C., and I'll use a perfect example. We had a number of ports in the U.S. that Dubai ports were actually going to operate for us, and we have a very close government relationship with the government in Dubai, and they do an excellent job of operating their ports. There ended up being some press. The negative ball started rolling, and before you knew it, Congress not only was not going to allow Dubai to operate these ports, but actually passed legislation dictating that they could not. So it turned out to be a negative just because no one was up in front of the ball. I think the positive of taking the steps is, again, you're able to educate, you're able to build relationships, you're able to help mold what kind of regulatory regime that you hope to operate under. And I think that's kind of where we are now. We've already had some agencies say, well, it doesn't fit within our space. CFTC has stepped up and said, we think it could be a commodity, but regardless, we're going to recognize and provide licenses to exchanges that want to trade derivatives on digital currency.
I think the reality is this technology is dabbling in the area of financial services, which is highly, highly regulated. And these regulators it's coming across their desk. They're getting involved. We want to make sure that when they're looking at this, they're looking at it with facts. And that's what the education piece is so important, because the regulation process, it's already happening. And Washington lags behind innovation. And that's where we step in to make sure that there's not a disconnect as best as we can. So you're all experts on DC here.
No, I think they want to stay away from D.C., which is hard to blame.
I suggested, actually. The weather's much better here today, at least.
Well, PERIANNE, thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, it was great having you. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to bringing more socialites, DC experts to help build the case for Bitcoin, not only in DC, but around the world.
Thank you.